The subject of this video is the relationship between Passover and Shavuot, from barley to wheat. According to the Jewish tradition, Passover was the time of the barley harvest, and Shavuot was the time of a wheat harvest. According to the Jewish tradition, there's an intimate connection in the Jewish calendar between Passover and Shavuot. Shavuot, according to the Bible, the term Shavuot means weeks, and it occurs, according to the Bible, 7 weeks, 50 days after the offering of the Omer. The term Omer is a word that really can't be translated. It's an amount. And according to the Jewish tradition, it was an amount of barley that was offered, marking the barley harvest. And then from the Omer offering of barley, 50 days are counted according to the Bible until Shavuot, and according to tradition on Shavuot there are offerings of wheat, marking the wheat harvest. Now, according to tradition, we connect the Omer to Passover so that there is then intimate connection between Shavuot and Passover. According to tradition, the Omer was to be offered on the second day of Passover, so that from the second day of Passover we count 50 days, 7 weeks until Shavuot. So therefore Shavuot is intimately connected to Passover. Shavuot will always be in the Jewish calendar 50 days, 7 weeks after the first day of Passover. So what I want to do in this video is to examine something that I think is very strange in the relationship between Passover and Shavuot, very strange in terms of our observance of Passover and Shavuot. So I'll start with Passover. Passover, we're celebrating the birth of the Jewish people in a nationalistic sense. We're not a people in a racial sense or an ethnic sense. From the very beginning of Jewish history, there have been people of differing racial and ethnic backgrounds, and anyone can convert and become a member of the Jewish people, no matter racial or ethnic background. What we're celebrating in the Exodus is the birth of the Jewish people. The Exodus, the first mass slave escape in recorded history. Our ancestors, Hebrews, escaped out of slavery in Egypt, and in the wilderness formed themselves into a people, the Jewish people. And so that on Passover then we're celebrating the birth of the Jewish people. According to our tradition, Passover is called the time of our freedom. And what's strange in relation to our observance of Passover is that on Passover we have an enormous amount of detailed law that is specific to Passover. There are laws in the Jewish tradition relating to the observance of holy days in general. Parenthetically, I'm purposely using the term holy day in English and not holiday, because the term holiday has connotations of vacation, fun, enjoyment, and the holy days of the Jewish calendar are meant to be times of a deep and profound spiritual experience. But there are laws in the Jewish tradition relating in general to holy days. But on Passover, in terms of laws that are specific to Passover, there's an enormous amount of detailed law. And detailed law then, it means law is an external system of authority telling us you do this, you don't do that, this is permissible, this is forbidden. And law then severely limits our freedom. It regulates our behavior, it limits our freedom. So how then, this is what's strange then in relation to Passover, how then can Passover on the one hand be the time of our freedom, and on the other hand we're governed in terms of our observance by an enormous amount of detailed law relating specifically to Passover that severely limits our freedom. Okay. So that's in terms of Passover. In terms of Shavuot, we're celebrating the birth of the Jewish religion. Judaism is a way of life of the Jewish people. Remember that Judaism is a religion not in an orthodox, correct belief sense of a faith commitment. Judaism is a religion in an orthoprax, correct deeds sense of a way of life, a culture of a people. So on Shavuot, we're celebrating the birth of the Jewish religion, our way of life as a people. And according to tradition, Shavuot is the time of the receiving of our Torah. And Torah here means the 5 books of Moses, which have a very special status in the Bible as a kind of legal constitution of the Jewish people, in that the Jewish law is based on commandments, mitzvot, commandments found in the 5 books of Moses. So that, according to tradition, Shavuot is the time of the receiving of our Torah, the receiving of the 5 books of Moses on Sinai. Now that's not written in the Bible, but according to tradition, we received the 5 books of Moses on Sinai. But more broadly, Torah refers to Judaism as our way of life. Judaism is a religion. There actually is no term for Judaism in the Bible and not in the Talmudic literature. When the Talmudic rabbis speak of Judaism, they use the term Torah, that is the central concept of the Jewish tradition. And Torah literally means guidance, instruction, so that the 5 books of Moses represent not only as a legal constitution, legal guidance, but also moral and spiritual guidance as well. But more broadly, Judaism is a way of life in the sense that Judaism gives us guidance in terms of how to live. So the term Torah then literally means guidance, and in our tradition we have 2 kinds of guidance. We have first halakha, that is the term for, that means law. In the literal translation, it comes from a root in Hebrew meaning to walk or to go. As I think the law then is the path upon which a traditional Jew walks or goes. But also the term halakha, meaning to walk or to go. Walking, it signifies that law is something external, because walking and going is something, it's an external activity. And law is an external system of authority that tells us you do this, you don't do that. This is permissible, this is forbidden. The Talmudic rabbis also use another term for law, for halakha, gufei Torah, which means bodies of the Torah, because the law then, halakha, the legal guidance of the Jewish tradition, is the external aspect of Torah, the bodily aspect. The spiritual side of Torah, spiritual guidance, is called Agadah, and means story. A story is a repository of ideas and ideals, true and false, good and bad, right and wrong. And Agadah then is the moral, philosophic, spiritual teachings of the Jewish tradition, moral and spiritual guidance. And this is the spiritual aspect of Torah, the soul of Torah. Halakha is the bodily aspect of Torah, the external aspect. The internal spiritual aspect is Agadah. The soul, the essence of Torah is Agadah. And by the way, the Christian polemic through the ages, polemic is an ideological attack. The Christian polemic against Judaism was that Judaism is a religion of law, and it's Christianity that's a religion in a spiritual sense. And this is a misconception regarding Judaism, because Judaism, Torah, is not only legal guidance, that's actually the external aspect of Torah. The essence of Torah is the spiritual aspect, the spiritual guidance, Agadah. And so, to go back then to Shavuot, Shavuot is the time of the receiving of our Torah, the birth of the Jewish religion, and law is an integral aspect of Torah. The essence is the spiritual side, Agadah, but the halakha, the law, is an integral aspect of Torah. And yet, and this is what's strange regarding the observance of Shavuot, and yet, even though law is an integral aspect, though it's an external aspect, it's an integral aspect of Torah, on Shavuot we have no laws whatsoever that are specific to Shavuot beyond the laws that generally apply to holy days of the Jewish calendar. No laws that are specific to Shavuot whatsoever. All of our practices on Shavuot, or observances, are in the way of custom. So that we have in the main 3 customs on Shavuot. One is that we eat vegetarian meals on Shavuot. Again, this is not a law, it's not a requirement, it's simply a widespread custom, and there are Jews who don't observe the custom, but it's a widespread custom to eat vegetarian meals on Shavuot. Second, we have a custom that we stay up the entire night, the whole night of Shavuot, studying. This is not a requirement by law, it's not a law, it's simply a custom, again, a widespread custom, not all Jews observe it, but it's a custom. And then third, we have a custom that we read the book of Ruth from the Bible. And again, this is simply by way of custom, it's not a law or a requirement on Shavuot. This is very strange regarding Shavuot. We're celebrating the birth of the Jewish religion, Torah, our way of life. And law is an integral aspect, and yet on Shavuot we have nothing in the way of law that relates specifically to Shavuot. All of our practices are in the way of custom. So this is what I want to explain now. This strange relationship regarding Passover and Shavuot. So in order to explain it, I want to go back to barley and wheat. Okay, barley, Passover, the barley harvest, and Shavuot, the wheat harvest. Barley is regarded in the Jewish tradition as a food that is an animal food, given to animals in an agricultural society. And wheat is symbolic of, I think, something uniquely human. From wheat we make bread. And bread is like a staple product, a staple food. In the Jewish tradition, what constitutes a meal in the Jewish tradition is having bread. So that bread has a very special significance then. Now, if we go back to the opening account of the creation of the universe in the Bible, on the sixth day, God looks over all of creation and God says, "Behold, it is very good." And notice that very good is not perfect. It's imperfect. It's in need of repair, improvement. And a fundamental concept in the Jewish tradition, having its roots in the Bible, in the opening account of creation, is the concept of tikkun olam, repair of the world, a fundamental concept of Judaism. And so that the human being is created in the image of God, it means that the human being is to be a partner in the creation to improve the world, to repair the world. That it's a world that's in need of improvement, in need of repair, very good. It's not bad, it's not only good, it's very good, but it's in need of improvement and repair. And the human being created in the image of God is to be a partner in the creation and to improve the world, to overcome hatred, injustice, cruelty in the world, to use our scientific knowledge, our technology, the application of scientific knowledge to improve the quality of life for human beings. So this is a fundamental principle then of Judaism, a fundamental idea of the repair of the world. And so that bread then symbolizes that the human being is really the only animal created in the image of God. The only animal has the power to transform nature, to take what's God-given bread and make it into even something better, to take what's God-given wheat and make it into something better, bread. Okay? So now, to go back then, so this is the symbolism of barley and wheat, okay? Barley, an animal food, and wheat, something uniquely human. So to go back then to Passover and Shavuot. Passover, the birth of the Jewish people. The Jewish people then, in just having been born, are like a small child. And a child is very animal-like. A child, and this is the symbolism of the barley, a child is very animal-like. A child at this point doesn't have the ability to distinguish on the basis of reason, true and false, on the basis of conscience, right and wrong, good and bad. So a child is very animal-like in that sense. In the Jewish tradition, there are two sides to human nature, or if you say the soul, two sides to the soul or to human nature. There's the animal side and the divine side, the divine image. And a twofold soul, a twofold nature. So the animal side is called in the Jewish tradition the evil inclination. It's an inclination, a tendency to do evil, to do wrong. And the evil inclination is the animal side. What we have in common with animals, animal drives and passions. The sexual drive, the drive for hunger, passions, feelings, are the side of our nature, animal nature, that we have in common with other animals. The divine side, the divine image of the human soul, human nature, is our reason and conscience, our ability to distinguish on the basis of reason between true and false, on the basis of conscience, right and wrong, good and bad. And the human being, and also the evil inclination, it's important to emphasize, is not evil in and of itself, not in an inherent way. The evil inclination is only evil in relation to the good inclination, relatively speaking. So that in the opening account of creation of the universe of the Bible, when God looks over all of creation and says, "Behold, it is very good," the Talmudic rabbis learned that that includes the evil inclination. The entire universe is very good that God created, God proclaims. So that includes the evil inclination. The sexual drive or lust. In Christianity, the sexual drive or lust is seen as a terrible sin. In Judaism, lust is not a sin. It's a part of our animal nature. And the sexual drive is not a sin. It's part of our animal nature. So that if we didn't have an evil inclination, a sexual drive, lust, we wouldn't be able to fulfill the commandment of the Bible to be fruitful and multiply. So the ideal then in Judaism is to control our animal nature. So there's a Talmudic teaching that says, who is the truly strong person? The one who controls his or her inclination. And the intention is the evil inclination, but notice the word is omitted to make clear it's not evil in and of itself inherently. The one who's truly strong is the one who controls his or her inclination, the animal drives and passions. And but the Talmudic rabbis in that source omitted the term evil to make clear that it's not evil in an inherent sense, only relative to the good inclination. Okay? So, our animal nature, the evil inclination, we are born with. That's something that we're born with. A child, when it's born, is like an animal and doesn't have the good inclination. The good inclination is something that we're taught and that we acquire. Children don't come out of the womb practicing acts of goodness. They don't know the difference between right and wrong and good and bad, or true and false. These are things that they learn. The good inclination is acquired. But the animal side of our nature, drives and passions, that we're born with. So that the people Israel then, in escaping out of slavery, are like on the level of an animal, a small child, who don't have the ability to be autonomous and on the basis of reason and conscience to know the difference between right and wrong and good and bad. And therefore, they're subject to law, to many laws. Laws, meaning an external system of authority, just as a child is subject to the external authority of parents. A child is expected to be obedient because a small child doesn't have the ability to be autonomous and distinguish on its own between right and wrong, good and bad. So too, the Jewish people then were given laws as a part of Passover, even though this is the time of our freedom in a physical sense, we're escaping out of slavery, we're on the level from a spiritual point of view, the level of a small child, and therefore we're subject to many laws demanding obedience, that we're obedient to an external system, not autonomous. One other thing in this regard, there's a Talmudic teaching that first, before the Talmudic teaching, in the story of the Exodus, chapter 3, verse 12, it says that God brought us out of slavery to serve God on Mount Sinai. And service of God, people have a tendency to think of the concept of service of God as ritual. But that's not so in the Bible. The essence of religion in the Bible is morality. again, if I had to choose one verse that captures the essence of religion in the biblical conception, it would be the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 18. You shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. Morality, right and good in the eyes of the Lord, means righteousness, goodness. And it's a moral demand above and beyond the law. The previous verse 17 in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy speaks of observance of commandments in a legal sense. And then it says, do that which is right, you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord, above and beyond the law. And Rashi, our great commentator who lived in the 11th century, understands that the verse, and you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord, means going above and beyond the law. So, that our physical freedom of escaping out of slavery and forming ourselves into a people, while we're still on the level of a child, animal-like, without the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, that physical freedom is only a means to the larger end of serving God morally and spiritually on Sinai. Where serving God morally and spiritually on Sinai, the essence is to go above and beyond the law, to be autonomous and know the difference between right and wrong and good and bad, and to live a life of righteousness and goodness. Okay, so now there's a Talmudic teaching then, on a verse from the book of Exodus that speaks of God, that the tablets, it speaks of the tablets which are written, the 10 statements. The biblical term is 10 statements and not 10 commandments. And the verse speaks of the tablets being written, being a work of God, and written by God. And there's a word that appears in the verse there that they're engraved on the tablets, the 10 statements. And the word engraved in Hebrew it sounds very similar to the word freedom. So the Talmudic teaching is like a word play, plays on the similarity in the words, and says, don't read the verse as if the words of the 10 statements are engraved on the tablets. Read freedom, because what the teaching is saying then is that law and external authority actually helps us to become more autonomous spiritually, morally and spiritually, because it's a disciplined law, that we're being obedient to an external system of authority that allows us to learn to control our animal side of our nature, our drives and passions, in our transition from becoming a small child animal-like to an adult who's autonomous and knows the difference between right and wrong and good and bad. So now to Shavuot, with the transition from Passover barley to Shavuot wheat, where we're becoming fully human, the Jewish people. And now it becomes clear why we have no law on Shavuot. Because the essence of Torah is not the external aspect of obedience to external authority law. That's an integral part of Judaism and of the Jewish tradition and of Torah. But the essence of Torah, and this is what we're celebrating on Shavuot, is the essence of our way of life, our religion, the birth of our religion. The essence is the spiritual aspect, going above and beyond the law. You should do that which is right and good, righteous and good in the eyes of the Lord. And therefore, all of the customs relating to Shavuot are in the way of custom and they're by way of custom and not law. We're not living according to law in Shavuot. We're going above and beyond the law. So in the case of vegetarianism, of eating vegetarian meals, it's very clear that in the Bible and in the Jewish tradition, there's an ideal of vegetarianism. This is a broad subject. I won't be able to elaborate, but I'll just say very briefly two things. Number one, in the opening account of creation of the universe, and in the second story following that, of the story of Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge, in both of those opening accounts of the Bible, the human being is vegetarian and there is no permission given to the human being to eat animal products. It is only after the flood, when God decrees to destroy the entire world with the exception of the family of Noah because of the wickedness of the human being, that after that, the human being is then given permission, after Noah leaves the ark, the human being is then given permission, for the first time in the Bible, to eat meat or animal products. And the clear implication is that's a concession to human weakness because of the wickedness of the human being. Human beings acting like animals and being wicked, that therefore they're going to be, as a concession to human weakness, allowed to eat animal products, but it's not an ideal. And then the second point that I'll make in regard to vegetarianism is that in the book of Deuteronomy, permission is given to the Jewish people to eat meat or animal products outside of the sanctuary. Meaning, the sanctuary means that it was where sacrifices were offered. Until the book of Deuteronomy, meat was allowed to be eaten by the Jewish people only as part of ritual practice, religious practice in terms of sacrificial offerings in the sanctuary. And the book of Deuteronomy then gives permission for eating meat in a profane sense, that outside of a sanctuary, not as a part of ritual practice, that Jews, we can eat meat, but the verse there, chapter 12, verse 20, if you look, it speaks of that we're given permission to eat meat when we're lustful. Again, it's like a concession to human weakness that if we're animal-like and we insist upon eating meat, then we're given permission, but it's not an ideal. Okay? So that's in terms of vegetarianism, that we're going above and beyond the law. We want to fulfill the moral and spiritual ideal of Judaism on Shavuot. The same with studying all night. It's not a law, it's not a requirement. We're going above and beyond the law as an expression of our devotion to Torah, the spiritual aspect, the essence of Torah, going beyond what the law requires. And then the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is a truly remarkable book in the Bible, and I highly encourage reading it if you haven't read it. It's only 4 chapters, very short. It can be read in a very short time. I won't tell the story, simply that the main theme of the book is acts of loving kindness. In Hebrew, chesed. And loving kindness means acts of kindness that go above and beyond the law, where you give in the consideration of your fellow human being. You give in on your own, you give in and give up on your own rights. And notice that when people on a widespread basis see giving in or giving up on your rights as being a sucker. But in the biblical conception and in traditional Judaism, this is the essence of religion, is the willingness to give in and give up on your rights. To go back to the verse, you should do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. Rashi says it's going above and beyond the law. Rashi says that's compromise. Compromise is to give in, to give up on your rights. Doesn't mean we're going to always compromise, but we're going to be willing to compromise. And the book of Ruth then is a story in which virtually everyone, almost everyone, gives in or gives up on their rights, is considerate of their fellow human being, and it's almost like a utopian society where almost everyone is considerate of their fellow human being. And this is the essence of a life of Torah, is you should do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord, righteousness, goodness, going above and beyond the law and being willing to compromise and to give in and to give up on your rights. Thank you.